There's a moment that quietly costs people hundreds of thousands of dollars, and almost nobody notices when it happens. It usually sounds something like this. I'll start investing once I'm making more. Or, I just need to get a few things sorted first. Maybe it's student loans. Maybe it's rent. Maybe it's the idea that investing is something you do later, when life feels more stable. And on the surface, that sounds completely reasonable. You want to be responsible. You want to be prepared. But here's the uncomfortable part. Waiting to invest doesn't just delay wealth. It reshapes your entire financial future. Quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. Because the real cost of waiting isn't measured in dollars today. It's measured in time you can never buy back. And time happens to be the one ingredient that makes investing actually work. Without it, even good decisions struggle to grow. With it, even small amounts can become surprisingly powerful. Most people think the biggest investing mistake is picking the wrong stocks. It's not. The biggest mistake is starting too late. And the strange part, almost everyone thinks they're still early. But there's a psychological trap hiding inside that belief. A trap that makes smart people delay investing for years, without realizing what it's costing them. And once you see it, you'll never look at starting later the same way again. Because the real damage isn't where most people think it is. And honestly, it gets worse the longer you wait. Idea 1. The illusion of later. Most people don't decide to delay investing. They just assume they'll start later. Later when the salary is higher. Later when the expenses calm down. Later when life feels a bit more sorted. And if you're in your 20s, that feels completely fair. You're building a career, figuring things out. Maybe moving cities, switching jobs, testing different paths. Investing feels like something older people do. People with mortgages. People with stable routines. People who have their lives dialed in. So the logic becomes, once things settle down, I'll start. But here's the quiet twist. Things rarely settle down. Life doesn't move in straight lines. Expenses evolve. Priorities shift. New goals appear. You upgrade apartments. You upgrade lifestyles. Sometimes, you upgrade stress levels too. And suddenly 5 years pass. Then 7. Then 10. Not because you avoided investing intentionally, but because life kept moving the starting line. And this is where the first hidden cost appears. Not money. Momentum. Investing isn't powerful because of how much you put in. It's powerful because of how long the money stays invested. Think about it like planting a tree. Planting a tree today doesn't look impressive. For years, it barely changes. But decades later, the difference between planting today and planting 10 years from now becomes enormous. The same principle applies to compounding, and this is the part most people underestimate. Compounding doesn't grow steadily. It grows slow, then suddenly fast, meaning the early years aren't just helpful. They're foundational. Miss them, and the math changes in ways most people don't expect. But before we talk about the numbers, there's another behavior quietly making the delay worse. Idea 2, lifestyle inflation. Let's imagine something. You finally reach the income you once thought would make investing easy. Maybe $70,000, maybe $90,000, maybe 6 figures. At some point in your early career, that number felt like the moment everything would click. Once I'm making that, investing will be simple. But something interesting happens when income rises. Expenses rise too. Not always dramatically. Often subtly. A nicer apartment. Better restaurants. A car upgrade. Convenient subscriptions. Nothing outrageous. Just small improvements that make life feel a bit more comfortable. And to be fair, that's not inherently bad. You work hard. You should enjoy life. But lifestyle inflation has a sneaky side effect. It absorbs future income before you invest it. So when your paycheck increases, your spending quietly grows to match it, which means the moment you plan to start investing still feels just slightly out of reach. You tell yourself, once things stabilize again, I'll start. But now the lifestyle is larger, and stabilizing takes longer, so the delay continues. A year becomes 3. 3 becomes 5. And the strange thing, from the outside, everything looks successful. Good income, good lifestyle, good career. Yet behind the scenes, something important hasn't started yet. Your money isn't working for you, and that leads to a realization many high earners eventually face. A moment that feels oddly uncomfortable, because they realize something that doesn't quite make sense. They earn more than they ever expected, but financially, they're not as far ahead as they thought they'd be. Which leads us to a question that almost nobody asks early enough. What if the real advantage of investing isn't the amount? What if it's the timing? Idea 3, the compounding gap. Let's slow down for a moment. Imagine 2 people. Same income, same investments, same discipline. The only difference is when they begin. One starts investing at 22, The other starts at 32. 10 years apart. Now, most people assume the second person can simply catch up by investing more later. But compounding doesn't behave like that. Those early years do something unusual. They create layers of growth. Growth on top of growth. Returns on previous returns. A snowball effect that becomes extremely difficult to replicate later. So when someone delays investing by 10 years, they're not just missing 10 years of contributions. They're missing the entire first phase of compounding. And that phase matters more than most people realize. Because compounding isn't linear, it's exponential. Meaning the early years, when growth seems small, are quietly doing the most important work. They're building the base, the foundation, the first layers of the snowball. Without them, everything later has to work harder. You can contribute more money. You can try to accelerate later. But replacing time is incredibly difficult. And here's the uncomfortable realization. This might already apply to you. Not because you made a bad decision, but because the world doesn't explain compounding very well. We're taught how to earn money. We're rarely taught how time multiplies it, which is why so many people only start thinking seriously about investing in their 30s, right when the math begins to get less forgiving. And if that feels slightly unsettling, good. Not because it means you've failed, but because awareness is the moment things start to change. Still, there's one more psychological trap that keeps people waiting even longer. And it's surprisingly common. Idea 4, the perfect moment trap. A lot of people believe they'll start investing when the conditions are right, when markets feel stable, when they understand everything, when they feel confident, when they have a perfect strategy. But investing rarely rewards perfect timing. In fact, waiting for certainty often means waiting forever. Markets rise, markets fall, headlines panic, then optimism returns. It's a cycle. And if you wait for the moment when everything feels safe, you'll probably keep delaying. Because investing always carries uncertainty. Even professionals accept that. The real advantage isn't predicting the future. It's participating in it early, consistently, calmly, over long periods of time. And here's the quiet truth. Most successful investors didn't begin because they felt perfectly ready. They began because they realized something simple. Waiting longer wasn't making the decision easier. It was just making the timeline shorter. And once that realization clicks, your perspective shifts. You stop thinking about investing as a complicated event. You start seeing it as a long-term system, one that benefits more from time than perfection. But this is where the story turns. Because the goal of this conversation isn't to make you feel behind. It's to show you something surprisingly empowering. The moment you understand the cost of waiting, you also understand the value of starting now. Let's step back for a second. This entire conversation might sound like it's about investing, but it's really about something else. Control over time. Most financial advice focuses on tactics. Which stocks, which funds, which strategies. But the deeper advantage in investing isn't tactics, it's timeline. People who start earlier aren't necessarily smarter. They simply gave their money more time to compound, more time to recover from mistakes, more time to benefit from growth they couldn't predict. And this changes how you think about investing entirely. Instead of asking, how much should I invest? A better question becomes, how early can I start the system? Because investing isn't about one big decision. It's about small, repeated decisions over long periods of time. Quiet contributions, automatic deposits, patience through volatility, calm discipline when markets get noisy. It's not flashy. It doesn't feel dramatic. But over decades, it becomes incredibly powerful. And here's the hopeful part. You don't need perfect knowledge to begin. You don't need massive capital. You don't need the perfect market entry. What you actually need is to stop assuming you have unlimited time. Because time is the one asset that compounds everything else. Money, skills, careers, investments. The earlier the system begins, the easier the journey becomes. And the longer you wait, the more effort the future version of you has to make. So this isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. Once you see the cost of waiting, you start noticing opportunities to act sooner. Small contributions, automatic investing, simple systems. Things that quietly move the timeline forward. And if there's one financial pattern that shows how powerful and dangerous timing can be, it's something many high earners eventually discover the hard way. They earn excellent income, but years later they realize something surprising. Their net worth hasn't grown the way they expected, which is exactly what we explore in the next video, because high income doesn't automatically create wealth. In fact, it sometimes hides financial problems surprisingly well. So if you want to understand why some people make great money but still feel financially behind, watch the video on your screen now. It explains one of the most common financial traps people fall into without realizing it. And once you see it, you'll start thinking about money very differently.